Welcome to COMP526. In this first session, I want to walk you through a bit of organizational matters and tell you a bit what the module is about. So the goals for today are basically tell you a bit what is going to be covered in this module. And I also want this no hard feelings. That's a way for you to see if that module is what you thought it would be. In the first 2 weeks, it's still relatively easy to swap modules if they're not compulsory for your course. Then more concretely, what I want to cover today is how the module is run. It's a lecture, but I've tried to add a few things that make it scale well to large groups and make it scale well to diverse groups. Question? No, that's from the last session. I'll come to the attendance code. The attendance code is one of those bits that I'll do differently from the normal mode is writing them on the board. I couldn't be bothered to do that, so I found a different way. I'll show you in a second. And I want to tell you how the module is assessed. The slide after this will come to the attendance code if you're getting nervous. I'm Sebastian. I'm happy for you to use my first name. If I'm in my office, then that's the place. Email is more reliable because that also works if I'm working from home. I have a PhD student, Ben Smith, who will run tutorials with you. So you can reach him here as well. The main hub for information around the module is the module website, which is here, is the QR code. Is also linked on Canvas and so forth. Should be easy to find. So whenever you have questions that you feel should be on the website, they probably are on the website. There's a few other things that I'll explain in more detail, and I have sent you an announcement about some of them already. We'll use something called Campus Wire as a system for you to be in touch as a group and be in touch with us. It's by and large a replacement for office hours, because office hours always have the problem that I give an answer to one person and then nobody else hears it, or I give different answers to different people. Campus Wire is much more fair in that sense. We'll come back to that. You have to sign up for this. This is not something that the university is officially using in other modules, although some of my colleagues found it useful and picked it up. So you'll have to just sign up on this. And here you need this pin, which is not anywhere else other than the announcement. And we'll use Slido. I'll come back to that in a minute. Very briefly on the module, it's by and large a theoretical computer science module. We'll talk about algorithms much more than we'll talk about software engineering or programming systems. It'll be more about the abstract ideas behind it. And the assessment reflects that a bit. We'll do some more practical things in the continuous assessments, but in the form of puzzles. And the bulk of the mark comes from the exam, which gives 60%. And more details on all of that later. Any questions at this point? So let me start with Slido, because especially for a large group like this, it's very useful to do. Just as a side remark, the enrollment for this module from last year has doubled, actually more than doubled, I think. So some of the organizational things and room sizes were a bit at the capacity limits, but we'll work our way around it. Slido is an audio response system. It's a website that you can use with your phones or laptops or other device. And the main idea is to have little polls in the lecture to wake you up. So let's try that as well. There's two things that we'll use. One is the polls that I just mentioned to ask you things, and then I can get some aggregate feedback from the class. You can also use it to send questions to me, and I'll try to keep my phone in sight. If people send questions, I will see it either directly or shortly after. Sometimes I'll just delay answering them till the end of a section. But that's a way for you to reach me during classes, and all of that works from remote as well. So let's have a play with this. Here's the question that I had put up earlier, so some of you have already signed up. If you haven't, please do that now. So you can go to slido.com, and then it asks for an event code, which is the module code, COMP526. And there's also the short link that I used on the website. As you see, you can just live see how people vote. I'll use it for different types of questions. Either just get an opinion about something, like in this case. The other thing we sometimes do is I'll throw in little understanding questions to see if something I just said has sunk in. I'll give you a minute to sign up for that. I also want to use Slido to distribute the attendance codes. So I'll fire up a poll where you can copy the attendance code and then enter it into the timetabling app. But I don't want to change the question straight away. Some of the things in teaching have changed during the pandemic, and people just kept using them. I've used that before the pandemic, so in a way it was super useful during the pandemic to have a tool like this, other than staring at the black screen and getting no feedback. But I've used it before, and I think it's useful for live sessions just as much as for anything online. And you will hopefully not have any online lectures during this course, but I'm sure some of you will have had the questionable joy of pandemic teaching. One of the challenges with master's modules is it's tricky to know the exact enrollment until students actually arrive. So my class list has 197 people, which is reasonably close to 186. Is anyone still trying to sign into Slido, or everyone who tried to managed to? So I should have stressed this earlier, but you can still change it. You'll have a little account on Slido. It's not a proper account, but it keeps a cookie and keeps your answers logged with a certain name and email address. I want to use that for giving you a participation mark. Basically, by just clicking something on Slido, you'll get 5% extra credit. For mostly doing nothing, you don't have to guess right. It's all about just being part of the fun. But for that to work, I have to somehow attach your participation to your name, right? And the way to do that is somehow couple it with your university email. So if you haven't used your university email for the sign up with Slido, there's a round thing in the top right, I think, where you can change your email. Preferably use the email version that is your user account that you also use to log into the computers that we have in the labs. You also get an alias with your actual name. I'll probably make that work too, but if you want to make my life easy, then use the other one. All right, so for this question, 2/3 roughly have not used stuff like this in at least face-to-face lectures, and the rest has. It's good to know. I'm sure you will find it easy to use. Here's the attendance code. In the normal sessions, I will throw this up when we get started, so you don't have to wait for me. But I thought I first want to welcome you before I throw numbers at you. I'll just leave this up and you can see it on your devices. I will slowly move on. Lots of murmurs. Are you still busy with the attendance code? As I said, we have time, right? We have a 2-hour slot. I don't intend to spend 2 hours talking. So no particular rush today, at least. My take on the attendance taking is I'd like to treat you all as grown-ups, the grown-ups you are. So forcing you to sit in class is not really something that goes well with my style of teaching. However, we have an obligation as a university for international students to check their visa conditions, which state that you have to be an active student. And that's defined in bums on seat attendance of lectures. That's a good part why we do the attendance tracking at MSc level. Don't waste much time on it. Let's just do it. It's useful for you to see when you attended. Other than that, I won't chase you harshly if you prefer to do something else during class time and watch the recordings. So take a note of the code. For the rest of today, I want to walk you through a few of these other things that we'll have going alongside the lectures, and give you a bit of a taster of the content. But to frame that a bit, a few philosophical remarks maybe. No matter how you teach, it's always useful to structure content. So I tried my best to do that, and I'm sure other lecturers do too. I've been teaching for a while in different formats in different countries and so on, and I haven't seen anything more effective than synchronous lectures. I'm stressing synchronous, not face-to-face, okay? Synchronous is just a simple way to make sure that you devote at least these 3 hours a week to our topic, field of studies. Whereas if you're trying to watch video recordings, I've done that myself for just for fun, trying to learn about other topics. And it's incredibly hard to keep motivated and stick to it, to the point that almost nobody finishes Coursera courses and so on. They're still great to have, but you're spending time and money of your life to learn computer science in depth. And I think the most effective way to make sure you do that is a synchronous teaching session. That's why we're here. In terms of making that a bit interactive, there's always a few students in a group of 200 who are confident speaking up in front of a room. On the other hand, we're a large room, and so not everyone is. So I've basically given up asking people for questions in class. Instead, I'm putting everything on Slido. If you want to ask questions there, you can do anonymously if you prefer, or you can keep your name in. And you can use Campus Wire if you're not the type of person who has the great question during class, but at some other time. So I'm trying to have several channels open where you can do that. And the last one is just a little psychology hack. Nobody can really stay focused for 90 minutes unless you're giving yourself wake-up cues. I'll have my coffee with me, but that's not the only thing. I'm standing here and I know you're watching me, so I'll stay awake, right? But you're just sitting there comfortably in this way too warm lecture hall. So after 10 minutes, you'll probably drift away, doze off, and you all have your laptops on, which I'm sure they're all just showing Slido. But the point is, waking up quickly in between is just very helpful. It doesn't take much time, but I think it's very effective. So we'll try that. So the module consists of these different things. We obviously have the lectures where we are now, with the Slido questions that I spent a lot of time talking about already. We have campus wire stretching along this. I'll say more about it in a minute. In terms of assessments, apart from the final exam at the end, which you will have to do, there's a few class tests, which are not actual class tests in the literal sense. They're online quizzes, and they're spread throughout the term. These are just old exam questions remodeled as an online quiz. And so you can practice on actual exam questions several times during the term. It's an online quiz, but it's timed. So make it at least a little more challenging and don't give you all the resources that you may have available. And we'll have two bigger continuous assessment parts, the programming puzzles. And the last bit is tutorials. I think I have an extra slide on this as well. Think of these as a second chance to hear some topics and a chance to practice on some exercise problems, working on stuff for yourself. You don't really learn algorithms from listening to some guy speaking on stage about them. You have to get your hands a bit dirty, which means getting a pen and a piece of paper out in most cases is enough. So not really dirty, but you have to get into the habit of puzzle solving and problem solving to really digest what algorithms are about. The goals for the module are to give you, on one side, a basic toolbox of algorithmic methods and techniques, so things that computer scientists have invented over the last decades that have been used over and over in practice. These are fairly fundamental things, and many of them already exist in libraries, but you need to know roughly how they work in order to use them effectively. And for those with a computer science undergrad degree, some of that will be just recap, but at least half of the room, something like that, is conversion master's students, so people who have done a non-computer science undergraduate degree and do a computer science master, where they are expected to catch up in this first semester much of what the undergrad degree would have taught. So that will mean for all those who haven't done a computer science undergrad degree, a more intense first few weeks, because you'll have to catch up quite a bit. We'll trim it down, and you're a bit, if you teach this to first years, you have to go a bit slower. You already have a bit more study skills. But expect a bit higher workload in the first half of the module, and probably in other modules too. So it's understood that that's a bit of a harsh time, but it's just not possible to squeeze it in without doing some effort. So that's first part. I also want to go a little further than that and give you some more advanced algorithms and data structures, where things are a bit more recent. They haven't been around for decades, and it's a bit more tricky to dive through. And some of them are also not so widely available in programs. So you might find yourself in an industry role where you have to implement some of those, if that's solving the task at hand. A more subtle side effect is the second point. Many of these foundational tools are just the vocabulary that computer science experts use in their jobs. And so they expect that you're able to use these vocabularies, but confidently and knowing what's behind it. A lot in computer science is about finding the right levels, the right ways to abstract things. Abstraction is the #1 technique we have to tame complexity. And finding good names and good concepts to build these abstractions is much of the craft. And so algorithms are ultimately all about that. And the practical thing is of course, combine methods, build new things out of them. So the actual content is split up in these 10 units, which we'll spend roughly a week on each. The week per unit is only true on average. Some are shorter, some are longer. We'll talk a bit about some mathematical techniques. I mentioned it's a more theoretical module, so we'll try to have some theorems and proofs in there. But it's also not a math module. I'll focus more on the idea part than on the formal writing down of proofs, but we'll do a little bit of that, just because it's an important part of designing algorithms. We'll talk a bit about how we model the things you have in front of you, computing devices in the general sense. I'll catch you up on fundamental data structures. That's the part that you will definitely have seen in some undergraduate CS module if you've done it. We'll talk about sorting and string matching. These are also foundations. And then we'll dive a bit deeper into all things relating to text. We'll look at how to compress text and a few more recent things on that. A quick note on error correcting codes to transmit text. We'll look a bit about on parallel algorithms, how to use the multi-core machines we have. We'll look at text indexing, which is pre-processing a large text so that it can search quickly. And the last unit traditionally has been a Christmas lecture on some more advanced topic that wasn't covered in the exam, but is kind of showing you a little bit. This is where the actual research action is happening. Any questions so far? Probably check Slido. All right, there's one question. Let me maybe take that at this point. I don't think we need the attendance code still, so turn that off. So the question was, okay, it's flashing back and forth. What the exam questions are like. We won't do much coding because some of you start with basically no background in programming. So I'll keep the assessments very basic on the coding side. Think of them more, the continuous assessment is more like a puzzle solving. The exam questions are similar, plus a bit of designing creative algorithms, something of this type. We'll get to our exam questions later in the course again, and the tutorials and class tests all show you what the exam questions could look like. Okay, mouse is very slow. Programming languages, we'll mostly use Python because that's what you're taught if you start on the conversion masters. You can use other languages. The content we're talking about is mostly agnostic to the language, right? Python is the main one, and where I'll have examples on the slides, there will be Pythonic. I'd say that's the same. The final exam is pen and paper. Exactly. It's not MCQ. It's a written exam, although some questions are essentially solve this puzzle for me, and then it's a relatively short answer, but you get to explain your steps in the way. Suggestions for a head start for non-CS students, non-CS undergrad students. You all have some undergrad degree, otherwise they don't let you in. But yeah, there's some material on the Unit 2 about fundamental data structures, and there's a few other book recommendations. The problem is it's very broad. Like an undergrad degree in CS takes 3 years. You're not going to catch up everything, but you also don't have to catch up everything, at least not for passing this module or surviving the masters. So maybe a bit more targeted. I'll come back to that. I like how you guys use Slido, so it seems to work. I'll put the lecture slides on the module website. There's subpages for the units. I actually put the ones very close to the ones that I'm showing are already on there. It occasionally happens that I have a last-minute flash of, oh, I could also talk about that. Then maybe I'll change it. I definitely update them after lecture. And as you may have seen, I'm drawing on the slides. And sometimes I do a bit more than just putting a dot. So you get a PDF from that as well. They're not really open book exams. What I used to allow is bring one A4 sheet, a cheat sheet, a handwritten sheet of paper, where you can take some notes, but it's not a book. So the idea is to allow you to bring in something just to not make you feel you have to learn everything by heart. But open book exam often means people just browse books and waste more time on this. We've experimented with this in the past, and it often doesn't work to the advantage of students. Popular question. So we have several quizzes. The ones on Slido are just for information, and I'm not actually looking at the answers you give. All I'll look at is whether you answered in so and so many of the polls. We'll also have the quizzes on Canvas for the class test, what's officially called the class test. These are assessed, and you get a mark on it. I'll come back to it, actually, on the slides. It's one A4 paper, both sides, handwritten. It must be your handwriting. OK. We'll mostly use Canvas just for publishing the marks and for you to submit the continuous assessment. So I'll update the module website, not so much Canvas. I'm not a big fan of this login. Whenever you have to look up something on your module, you have to log into Canvas first. Oh, come on. No. No, you cannot find the slides on Canvas. You can, however, find them on the website. OK, we'll come to that for the class tests. The way I set them up in the... You're well ahead of all of it. So the class tests, I used to set them up that you have a practice version with the same type of question that you can do as often as you feel like. And then the real one is timed, and you can only do it once. But you can get the same type of question practiced first. So you see exactly what is the type of format. It's auto-marked, so you have to type the format in the right way. So you can use the practice to make sure you have that right and understood what type of question it will be. And then the real one, when it counts, you have to do, and you can just do it once. Do we have to study all the units for the exams, or are some units only for assignments? Nothing's only for assignments. The unit 9 is only for fun. I don't know. Slido will mostly be used in class. I don't think Ben used it in the tutorials. And other than that, I don't know what to use it for. Think of Slido for lectures and Campus Wire for outside of lectures. They're filling similar roles, but both are a bit more geared towards the two scenarios, synchronous or asynchronous. We'll come back to that, all right? Well, OK, maybe I can say one thing. I usually try to balance things, so there will be different sections in the exam, 5 sections, and you have to do 4 out of them. The best 4 are marked. And each section has a more bookwork style question, a question where you have to work on something, but it's applying an algorithm, for example, that we've seen. And the third is a little more creative. You have to do something new or combine things in a new way. It's a bit abstract as this, and well, we'll see more examples later in the semester. Yep, I think I do. Yeah, that's the same as before, right? For specific topics, there's some sources on the website. Maybe I should have shown the website. So on the unit subpages on the module website, there's sources and further reading for most of the units. I don't have a textbook that covers the entire module. I cherry-picked from various places, but I think all are available in the library in some form. So you can go and grab the chapters from the library that this is based on. Can we get a hold of PhD students in your research group? They try to run away, but Ben is my PhD student, one of them. So you can try to grab him next week in the tutorials. If you have more, if I misunderstood the question, I'd maybe ask again. Yes, you can write pseudocode in exams. Yeah, I like Discord is fine, you know. CampusFire has a few features that are nice. Now, it's likely that whatever feature I mention, you'll point out, Discord can do that by now. Fair enough. So Canvas has CampusFire has anonymous posts as opposed and normal ones. It has a few features that look a bit more like Reddit, and the other is more of a chat room. So I find it overall a bit more structured. But yeah, people love Discord, I know. Like the session today or in total? That depends a bit on you guys. Right, so 2 hours today, but I hope I won't speak for 2 hours. We'll have teaching. So, okay, maybe I'll just point you to Canvas. Is this the time to switch over to the website? So, the module website is here. That's what it looks like. And it has a link to Canvas. The front page of Canvas, what they call syllabus, is publicly visible. And it has this overview of the term, which shows you the weeks, how the uni calls weeks, and then the Monday of that week, how the rest of the world calls things with dates. There's 1 week where I'll be away, and other than that, it goes up until the Christmas break. And there's not really anything after the Christmas break apart from the exam. So here, that should be basically the final overview of the exam. I hope we won't have to move things around. All right? Good. So what else? You should all be on an all-student Canvas course. It's something that staff sometimes don't immediately get added to, or so I'm not always seeing exactly what you see. But past papers, there's a few past papers available through that online course centrally for everyone. That's where you should find this. Okay, I click, then it takes a second, and then it reacts. By that time, I have clicked again and undo the. Well. The programming puzzles might be called projects, but there will be no group work. Students tend to hate group work. Let's not get into that for too much. I suppose that means for the exam, and the answer is yes. You have to obey the rules, otherwise you might get punished. Terminated, like, that's a harsh word, maybe not. I have no idea what the passing rate was last year. Well, maybe I'll have to look it up and tell you another time. There will be 3 questions in each section and 5 sections on the exam, where from the sections, it's best 4 out of 5. And it'll be in January, guys. It's a long way to go. Okay, I think I covered that. There's a separate module. If you're doing a conversion master, you will have a programming module that hopefully covers everything you need for that. Tutorial. Okay, if we ever get back to the slides, I'll show you. I share the slides. The first slide has Ben's email. Okay, it's again a bit slow. Obviously, the algorithms one, like I'm biased. No, I mean, in seriousness, I don't know. It depends what you want, right? Depends on your course and so on. Each and every one of you has an academic advisor who you should have met during Welcome Week. Maybe it's even me for some of you. You can ask them for such questions. With the context, they can give you a more intelligent answer. Right, okay. If there's timetable clashes, there really shouldn't be timetable clashes, but sometimes it's inevitable. As sad as it is to say, it's probably more worthwhile going to the tutorials because all lectures are recorded and the tutorials typically are not. Of course, you lose the fun of the live interaction. Yes. Okay. Good question. I should probably know. I don't know if the tutorials are mandatory. I think they are. I think they are. You're supposed to attend them. Another question is if Ben is forced to do the attendance code checking. That's the part I'm not sure about. But then again, you grown-up individuals, me trying to treat you like grown-up individuals, I'll leave it with that. I've heard that before. I don't know where this comes from. keep guessing. No, I'm not. But I've lived in Canada. All right, shall we try to... Let me switch away quickly before you fire up new stuff. Yeah. So the thing about researchers is it's pretty easy to Google them. If they want to survive in academia, they usually have a website and typically put a CV on there. But yeah, good research skills or good accent tracking. Right. Okay, I think we covered much of what I prepared on the slides, but not all of it. So dead silence. It's about marking time. I said we have 60% from the exam, and the rest is continuous assessment. That's split up in 2 programming puzzles, each 10%. The combined class tests I talked a bit about. That's the online quizzes that you'll do throughout the term. That gives you another 15%, and 5% is just for sitting here and clicking, right? That's the easy mark to earn. That's for participating in Slido. It doesn't matter if it's correct what you say, if the answer has a correct, if the question has a correct answer anyways. And I think I explained what the class tests will look like as well. So I'll try to do it very fair. So it is timed. You have 20 minutes to answer the question. And that's about how much time I think you need if you're a bit slow and careful. The point is, I don't want you to open the question and then just Google the heck out of it. Or, well, we use other tools that didn't exist last year around this time. I'll talk more about this in a second. So it's timed, but you have this practice version to see what it's like. Do I dare to look? How's your life after retiring? I'm happy to swap salaries with Zlatan, right? Any time. All right. Questions on the assessments, or on the marking scheme? Okay, this is the unpleasant part, but I want to say a few words about it. Academic integrity is this notion very strong in British universities that you should show good academic practice in all your assessments. Now, that term is not exactly self-explanatory. The rules in the UK are about the strictest I've seen. And there's a really strong notion of no tolerance for violations against that. So pay close attention. There's nothing to be scared of, but people are strict about it. So try not to let that work against you. The short common sense version is this. Whenever you're assessed, it must be your own work. And if you use someone else's work, you have to cite it and give an explicit source for that. That's basically all. And the rest is fleshing that out because sometimes the boundaries are a bit blurry. And we'll have to talk a little bit about what that means for generative AI tools, because some of the assessments are just made super boring through those. It doesn't affect algorithms as much, but a little bit. And I want to say a few words about that. The other important bit is, for this module, there's no group assessment. So all your assessed work has to be your own work. If you're working with someone else, you have to acknowledge it. And you can get in trouble even if someone steals your work and copies it. If that's fair or not is not for me to decide, but the rules are fairly strict. So try to avoid that. Okay, let's maybe let me skip this one because we've had a lot of fun on Slido already. I wanted to collect a bit thoughts from you. Why do we do assessments in the first place? And there's many good answers. You want to stick a mark at the end of the scores on your degree, but that's not the most interesting part. Assessments are also a way to force you to show what you know and to practice. And maybe this last bit is something that you can try to keep in mind. Now, I know things get stressful. You have certain career goals. You want to achieve certain marks, and all, I get that. But try to not let that spoil the whole thing. The learning experience of assessments is equally important, especially for the continuous assessment. If you look at the percentage that you get for some of these assessments, it's just not worth risking a lot or spoiling the learning for that little part of the mark. That's maybe the gist there I wanted to say. There's various things, different terms that are used in this context that I wanted to clarify. So these are different things that you can do that are not considered good academic practice. Collusion is whenever students collaborate where it was not allowed and then submit this as their own work. And the interesting bit there is it doesn't really matter if the rest of the group knows that you submitted this as your work. So it's a fairly strong notion. And similar, copying means you copy from someone else copies from you. That's enough for the offense of copying to have happened. Plagiarism is a relative of that, where you copy from some published source, not necessarily one of your fellow students. Other than that, it's the same. And all of these are considered inappropriate. Right? Let's be clear about that. Again, the philosophy behind it is you're using someone else's brain power instead of your own and want to get assessed for that. That's what we don't like. Now, a few words on on generative AI and all those tools. Like, just to be clear, I'm talking about ChatGPT and also image generators like Midjourney and all the others, Stable Diffusion and what else not. GitHub Copilot, of course, for coding assessments is very relevant. Won't help you very much for this module. All of this is great. Like, I love playing with this. It's super exciting, and who knows where it will lead us, right? So I think it's generally a very exciting thing. I don't want to overhype it, but it can do cool things. And it would be stupid not to try things out. But don't do it during the assessments. The cost is high, and you're losing something with it. I mean, first of all, as I'm sure you know, all the tools have their flaws, and some of them seem intrinsic. It's not that they'll be ironed out very soon. They can still be super helpful, but there's a reason we still teach kids in primary school mental arithmetic and so on, even though calculators have been around for decades. So why do we do that if people can just use the calculator? Because we think, we collectively, all educators, think that skills in your brain are effective scaling, generalizing, using the AI term, from the mental task of adding numbers to other things, and that you only learn this by practicing it. So you're building up something that is making you an expert, and that comes from doing things. It comes from knowing, learning new topics, like sitting in a lecture, but it also comes from doing things. And that's exactly the problem if you let some AI system do the puzzles for you, you don't do that practice, and at least say we don't know what that means for you. It probably means you get less of a learning outcome. That's at least what everything points to. With this mindset, the university has set out a separate policy just on generative AI, where they try to explain in what sense are you allowed to use it and what is unacceptable. And it's relatively narrow, but it's explicitly allowed that you use tools, but you're only allowed to use it to prepare something, to do background research, say. Similar, like you would use Wikipedia, with the same drawbacks, right? You all know if you read something on Wikipedia, it could be written by this one jerk in Texas that somehow got through all the edit wars. But most likely it's all right. It's just, it needs double checking sometimes. Same especially for all ChatGPT answers. And you're allowed to use it for proofreading, but people restrict it to finding typos and grammar mistakes. Formulating text from bullet points would be beyond that in this, according to our regulations. And we'll see if this is the last word spoken on this, right? It's new. Literally, for last iteration of this module, it wasn't relevant. So it's maybe subject to change, but that's what we have for this academic year, I think. And it would not be acceptable to use the tools and just pretend it's your output. Now, it's okay sometimes to use the tools and cite them. For example, okay, I didn't pick the example. Sometimes you want to say, it's hard to imagine a useful example in algorithms, to be honest, but some common knowledge is often very crisply formulated by a ChatGPT answer, and if you cite it with the prompt, that might be a useful resource, like if you cite a Wikipedia article. That's also fine. Important is, it has to be a citation. You have to give the source, and you have to mark it's not your thought, it's coming from there. All right. If this is too short for you, or if you want to check boundary cases, there's 2 links with the official guidelines. And also, I want to point this out. This is basically done by our library. They have a few know-how courses. One is on generative AI, just showing a few basic things that probably many of you already know, but maybe there's a few bits that you don't. It's new for everyone. And they have a few other things. They have a session on time management skills, which might be a few useful hints there too. All right. I've seen your questions on Slido, but I want to get through this first. That's still part of this academic integrity point. The way the question is intended, so I'm reporting this from some research that educational researchers have done. They have asked students a bunch of questions about their personality and their life circumstances and so on. And among other things, they asked them self-report about whether they cheated in assessments. And then they tried to find some trait of these people that predicts whether or not they would cheat. And so this question is getting at what did they find is the most likely thing that students who did A often were found also reporting to cheat. All right? And I'll collect your answers a bit first so that you're not immediately influenced by what other people said. All right, we'll definitely have to work on our timing. Like it's, I'm slower than I wanted to go. So let me show you. It's a nice snapshot. Like lazy stood out very big at the first time. There's many things in there. Definitely. So I'm not talking about a causality, right? What they tried to find is a thing that went together, correlated with self-reported cheating. Well, I finish typing, but I mean, there are many interesting things in there. The number one reason that they found that students self-reported that correlated with this was, I don't have time. Okay, simple as that, and shows here too. There might be the correlation with lazy, but that's not what the scientists found on closer look. They said when students report they don't have time, it's more likely that they are lacking the time management skills. When you all have the same 24 hours a day, obvious, and you spend them in different ways, and you're all doing the same course, or at least many of you are in the same course, and some people cope, others don't, for many reasons. But time management seems to be the thing that you can do something about. And so there's a video going into the research. And I want to point out again the article where our library people did their best to collect some time management skills. I'll try to help you a bit in the assessments, but I still have to check if we can get that set up on Canvas like this. Try to have an early submission that you get some part marks for, but which is assessed in a very simple, black-white, sensible, non-sensible way. Try to start early on all the assessments. I can only say that to you, and hope you take it somewhere. Take it serious. Time management helps to avoid falling to the trap that then leads to cheating, which again is bad. Last word of warning, it can get really bad. So these are different categories of how academic misconduct might be classed. If it's just a minor error where people think this was not even on purpose, nothing really happens, but you can get a deduction in the mark. If you didn't properly cite something, but there's no intention to deceive recognizable, it might still not have harsh consequences, but people might already decide to cap that assessment at the pass mark, which it can cost you a lot of percentages for a relatively small thing. The more serious cases are C and below. So C is the standard kind of cheating case where some student copied from someone else, and that's just obvious from the submissions and so on. If that happens for the first time, you get a 0 on that assessment, but you have a mark on your record. And it becomes a category D if after the warning that this has been detected and found, you do it again, then it's category D. And that means a 0 on the entire module. And you're only doing so many modules, so that has an immediate knock-on effect for the final grade. There's a more serious offense that could even get you kicked out straight away without further questions. That rarely happens, but it's an option. And what I want to point out is serious malpractice. That sounds like you're committing half a crime. But the official definition says serious malpractice is if you pay someone to do the coursework for you, use some of the websites that offer this. That's classed as E. It could get you kicked out straight away. Like really, that's serious. Don't do it. And people class it the same way. If you take the entire assessment, feed it to ChatGPT, and just take what comes out and submit it as your work, same kind of classification. That's a very strict way to look at it. It's not mine, but it's the one that will be followed. So just don't do it, okay? You might question, how do we find things? There's software tools that help with that. And it's an arms race between generation tools and detection tools getting better. I'm sure neither side is perfect, but the simple cases are often found. Ben will talk maybe about this for the tutorials. Last year was unfortunately quite a few cases. So I promise to be a bit more clear in class. Just don't do it. It's a pain for us to deal with, and you get yourself in trouble. Okay, end of the gloom and doom. Very quickly on the tutorials. We'll have a sheet published every Monday. The first one is actually already out, but you'll only cover it next week, and we'll cover the material that this tutorial sheet is about this week, and maybe we should get it done on tomorrow on Friday. It has several problems for you to work on. I mean, you can look this up on the module website later. It has some practice problems, which often are old exam problems, and sometimes some enhancement problems, things that I think is that we thought are useful to think about, even if they go beyond what would be asked in an exam. The tutorials themselves are the 1-hour sessions in smaller groups that are scheduled throughout the week. And what happens there is basically you'll be taught in smaller groups about these problems. And there's also a forum for discussion. The problems themselves, we'll publish some solution hints afterwards. But I want to point out that, again, you get more out of this if you follow the suggested course here. But this is not something we check. So this is up to you. When the problems come out, you should try, as soon as we covered the material in class, try to work out the solutions for these problems and write it down. And since that is not assessed, you're happy. We're happy for you to do that in groups or in whatever scenario. That's up to you. But writing down your answers forces you to be concrete. And so try to make that a habit. If you can somehow find the time, this will be very rewarding. And then in the next tutorial session, you'll hear from Ben about the sample solutions, and you can discuss in the smaller groups. You'll all be assigned a group on your timetable, so you can check which one that is. Hopefully that will have worked out so that everyone is in one of those groups. Questions? Okay, we have CampusWire. It's an online platform you can sign up for. Many of you have already done that. There's basically two things we use in there. There's what they call a class feed, which is a bit like Reddit. You can ask questions and people can answer. You can ask anonymous if you prefer. It supports math and so on. We'll have some post explaining the details on CampusWire itself. Basically, that's the point where you can, if you have some question from the lecture or the tutorials, you can post it on CampusWire. And the idea is that other students can also answer, as well as Ben and I and other helpers. There's also a chat room that we haven't used massively last year, but that's for synchronous quick things, if it's not covered on Slido. Right, so you can ask public questions, and others can join in to answer them. And try to do that. So what we'll do is, whenever a question comes up, I will not answer it immediately. Even if I'm sitting on my laptop working on the module, I would not do that, but rather leave a day or so for you to answer if it's something that's not urgent. Because that teaches you much more. The person that answers for someone else's question learns a lot in the process. You can also ask private questions or posts which just go to Ben and me. If you feel this is a question about an assessment that might spoil some of it, then that's a opportunity for the private questions. I motivated a bit earlier why CampusWire as opposed to standard office hours. And the reason is just you can ask questions and I can give the same answer to everyone. And so it's fairer that way. It allows you to learn something by answering questions. And you can do it anonymously if you feel frightened for whatever reason. If you don't want to have your name sticking to the question, you can do that. Right. Good, almost done with that part. Somewhat with a wink on the philosophy of the module. It's not so much about random tinkering, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We don't know why. I hope it's not too small. It's more about, like mathematics, about the universal truths of algorithms. And I smuggled in practical algorithms because we'll focus on the kind of algorithms that have been used in practice, that are efficient in applications. But we'll still be on the math teacher side in the sense of having a formal model of reality first, make quantitative predictions, and then maybe at the end validate that in experiments. Is maybe similar to other natural sciences in that sense. Physics also often makes a formal model of the world and then validates that. There's the bit in between where computer science goes further. We're also engineering solutions. So unlike physics, where you can't simply invent new laws of nature, we cannot invent laws of nature, but we can invent algorithms. It's almost the same. Good. There are a few questions on Slido. Let me come back to those. But there's something else I want to do with you before we run out of time. So I'll try to be snappy on these. For the 5% participation mark, this is only for the Slido polls. And there's no option, I think, to do the vote anonymous because it's always just the aggregate that we see. So it's only about the polls on Slido, the green questions on the slides. That's what it's about. Right, if you happen to get the very same answer as a classmate, I mean, if there's a random chance for that happening, we'll take that into account. The cases I'm talking about from last year, these are completely beyond doubt. It's so obvious. If there's entire paragraphs literally identical, including the typos, right? It's fairly blunt things I'm talking about. So if it's okay, if it comes to the allegation of some misconduct, there will be an investigation where we collect evidence, and then we have an academic integrity officer who takes these away from, so it's not me investigating it because I'm maybe biased teaching the module. So someone else looks at it, collects the evidence, and I think you get a say in it if you can appeal against the decision and you can make your point at that stage. So if there's something like the very unlikely case that really by pure chance it's very similar to some source, it should be possible to root out at that point then. We're mostly talking about fairly obvious things, and I hope we don't have to deal with them. The way it's set up, so this is part of Canvas. If you submit things, you get a little report that tells you how much plagiarism the tool has found. And the numbers sometimes don't mean much. Often, if you put references in your submission, the references are often exactly the same as other people referencing the same thing. Obviously, we ignore all that. So you get some report and you can look at it. So you should see if there's something fishy happening, you can alert it to people. If it's just tools like Grammarly that only correct grammar, I think is covered by this spell checking exemption. The problem is that the borders get unclear there now. I think this is a question we'll come back to, but many of our assessments are not really essay questions. I won't really ask you to write essays in the sense of maybe some social sciences or humanities subjects would do. So I feel it's much less relevant. And I'm happy for you to do spell checks. Nothing's more annoying than reading a text where there's lots of typos. So it's overall a good thing. Not easily, because it causes problems with timetabling, but you can discuss with Ben if the rooms have capacity and there's nothing else speaking against it, maybe you can informally do it. I would leave that to Ben. I totally agree. Okay, Slido being slow again. I normally do a break in between. The break was your question time, I think, this time. All right, the submissions are on Canvas, which means essentially a PDF should be the main thing, but we'll talk more about this. It's called Turn It In. You'll see it on Canvas when we set up the assessments. Right. Whenever you asked, I guess maybe you're gone by now. Sure. I mean, yeah. What can we do? There will be some proofs, often not very formal in the details, but we'll cover more proofs tomorrow in the kind of style that I think you should have some background in. The exam questions often end up very low on proofs because that's not my focus for the module. But I think formal thinking is important in algorithms, so it's not nothing. Good question. I think you can. I think you can if it's before the deadline. Yeah. I know it's fairly strict, so paraphrasing in your own words. The thing is, if you do this and don't cite the source, that's the problem, right? You're stealing someone else's thoughts. They had a brilliant idea, and you steal the idea. You just put it in your own words. And so that's the part that we don't like. In that sense, it would be considered plagiarism. But of course, it's another question how to detect it. Yeah, so I think we're all a bit exhausted. But I would still like to do something with you. Now, we may have to start this and you finish it off sometime later. I'd like to do a prior knowledge survey with you, which is a a little bit, it needs some mental capacity to do it properly. So let me motivate why. First of all, it's totally anonymous and so on. It's a Google Forms, and I don't care who scores what in this. I want to get an aggregate feeling what kind of prior knowledge you have. And the idea is to help me in putting a bit of focus on different topics, or maybe not, if everyone's already up to speed. The questions cover the questions cover a lot of topics that are only tangential important for this module, but I think they're representative of what you've done before coming here. So I'd like to ask you to fill this out, and don't guess. All the questions have a I don't know, and it's fine. Some of the things that are asked are not really relevant for the module. I just want to see if you know them. Make an effort to answer it correctly. There's no real time pressure. So I normally give half an hour to an hour in the lecture slot. We technically have 45 minutes till 5, but I don't really want to keep you for 2 hours here. But please fill it out. It's very helpful for me and hence for you. But you don't necessarily have to do it in this room. That's all right. Let's say, yeah, it's not much time till we see each other tomorrow morning again, right? It's not much time. So maybe let's do this until next week. So if you don't have time to do it, I'll check how many you have submitted till tomorrow. Maybe we can discuss it briefly. Otherwise, next week.